make it 7 o'clock, so we'll make a start. Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee. Can I ask that everyone's on mute if you're not speaking, to avoid any feedback. Welcome to all members, anyone listening online, and also to the officers and external audit. So taking the items on the agenda, number 1, apologies. Tom, do we have any apologies?
No formal apologies received, Chair.
Thank you. Second item is confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 30th of November. One thing on this, I noted under item 10, which was about the internal audit delegation, in the minutes was that the committee endorsed a recommendation to council of agreement to that, but it has since been confirmed this matter is actually being considered by Cabinet in March and not by council. For subsequent advice was that it should go to Cabinet and didn't have to go to council. So I will propose approval of the minutes subject to this reference being to council being corrected to Cabinet. Do I have somebody to second if we're happy that the minutes are correct? So I say thank you, Gordon. Councillor Brown. Can I have all those in favour, please?
Carried, Chair.
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Jones, to the meeting and to your first meeting of this committee. Item number 3, declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest this evening? Is that a general no? No declarations of interest, thank you. Petitions, deputations and questions. Tom, have we had any deputations or questions come in?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Questions with notice from members, item 5. Do we have any questions from members, Tom?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item number 6, notices of motion. Any notices of motion, Tom?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. We're on item 7 of the agenda, which is external audit update. Like to welcome Laurelyn Griffiths and Paul Harvey from Grant Thornton to provide a verbal update and take any questions as required. I'm not sure which of you would like to start.
I'll start, Chair. I just wanted to sort of formally introduce myself to the committee. I will be taking over from John Gregory as your engagement lead for the audit of the 2021-22 financial year, so the sort of upcoming audit cycle. So hopefully no surprises later on when I suddenly start appearing at meetings. But as I've had minimal involvement, no involvement really in the 2020-21 year, I'll now hand over to Paul to give you an update on how the remaining bits of work are going.
Thank you.
Thanks, Laurelyn. So for the 2021, the only piece of information we need to present is our annual audit report, which gives our findings for our VFM work. We were hoping to bring it to this meeting, however, circumstances have conspired against us and we're still trying to finalise it. So it's almost there and it will be with you at the next audit committee. I think at this point it's worth pointing out that there's no significant findings from the work that we've undertaken so far, just to give you some assurance. With regards to the 21-22 audit, we're due to start our planning shortly, and as in the normal cycle, we'll be bringing our audit plan to the next audit committee on the 26th of April.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions to ask the external auditor? Either put up your real hand or your virtual hand. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I note, Paul, you said that there were no significant findings. Are there other findings that you'll bring to our attention?
Yeah, so the way that the VFM for 21, obviously it's the new regime. So instead, in the past, we've kind of given like a binary report on whether it's either qualified or unqualified. This year in the new regime, we'll give a range of judgments. So some maybe minor improvement recommendations that come through, but they're a bit like the recommendations that come through the audit findings and report. There won't be anything significant, and but there may be a couple, but it is subject to review at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. De La Rocha.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is in respect of the VIA, but just so the committee are aware, we submitted a self-assessment return to the auditors some time ago to facilitate the VFM work. From the council's point of view, so from the officer's point of view, the first I have heard about any findings is tonight at this meeting. I have had no feedback from the auditors on any matters, whether significant or otherwise. Now, normally, I regret having to mention it at the meeting, but I wanted the committee to be aware that I know nothing. I'm in the same position as you. I have no feedback whatsoever. It's regrettable, but that's the situation. So I will wait for Paul and the team to let me know what the findings are, and we'll go through that process. But I just wanted the committee to be absolutely aware of what the position is. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, have you got your hand up again, or is that a legacy hand? Thank you. Yes, it's obviously disappointing that we haven't got that report for this meeting, but we will obviously look at it at the next meeting, and hopefully Mr. Del Rocca will have had sight of that, so any comments can be made. I was just going to ask you, we did discuss previously at this committee the value of having a presentation by the external auditors to full council, especially on the value for money side of it. Is that something that you've done with other councils? Would you think that that's a useful presentation to do?
I'm not sure whether Paul's done it at any of his councils this year so far. I think you're definitely not alone in not having your audit annual report yet. So it's still relatively early days in terms of how these reports then sort of get presented and how the findings get presented. So if it's something that you think would be useful, and if it's something that you think would be beneficial to the council, that's definitely something that we can do.
Thank you. Sab, do you want to come back in on that? Unmute, please. Yeah, thanks.
To say that, and Laurelyn won't be aware of this, that it is an issue that we did raise with John previously, and John was happy to do that for us. And the reason we simply ask is that, you know, the fact that the external auditors are independent of officers is really important to us, and we thought it was only right that we'd like all members to hear their views of where we are, and particularly our financial resilience firsthand. We think that's very important, given that you have experience of working across lots of different authorities. There is a tendency to think that maybe we're not as good as we are, or we're not as bad as we are, and I think that perspective is extremely important, and it's one of the reasons why the committee decided to again opt into the national procurement arrangements, because, you know, we value the independence of the auditors, and we would like your voice to be heard by all members. So if you were able to accommodate that request at the right time, I think we would all appreciate that, officers and committee alike.
Thank you. So if the committee is in agreement, we can ask the external auditors. We'll obviously get that report at our next meeting, and then we can schedule in a convenient point to actually present to full council. Thank you. Any other questions for the external auditors? Councillor McCartney.
Thanks, Rosemary. It's not necessarily a question to the external auditor. Just I've been trying to flick through our internal audit schedule whilst we're here, but I can't do it. So I might as well just ask Rachel. It's probably easier. Rachel, does an absence of a report from Grant Thornton leave us in an awkward position with our internal audit scheduling?
Through you, Chair.
Yes, Rachel, sorry, I'd like to answer that.
No, from my perspective, it doesn't present any issues from an internal audit perspective, no.
That's fine, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks very much. Obviously, Grant Thornton are welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting, and hopefully you'll find that informative and interesting. But if you do want to leave at this point, that's entirely understood. We'll move on to item 8 then, risk management, and to receive a report from Strategic Director for Resources. Over to you, Sav. Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, risk management is something that we discuss quite a lot, isn't it? Everyone will recall that we do periodically review the strategic risk register. It will be on the next, we scheduled for the April meeting. We also committed to producing directorate risk registers. That's the debate we had, I think it was at the last meeting actually. And we do have Zurich Municipal facilitating those sessions at directorate level, and I know they are booked in for February, and you know, given that nothing too crazy has happened with the pandemic, I don't see why we won't proceed with that, so that's good. At the same time, we have had we've had some training from Zurich Municipal for officers, and I know that members also had a session one evening. We've got some more sessions coming up from Zurich in relation to contracting and procurement issues, which is something we wanted to focus on. What I've done in relation to the policy hadn't been updated for some time, and we've evolved some of our practice, and we've also agreed some of the changes that I've just referenced. So we've updated the risk management policy, had that looked at by both internal audit and Zurich. And what I've tried to do in the policy, I don't think the fabric of it has changed substantially. What I've tried to do is amplify one or two of the areas in the policy to give a bit more guidance and instruction for managers as we're trying to raise the profile of effective risk management in the council. So I'll talk a little bit more about risk appetite and the way we need to think about that. Reflected some of the work that we do around the annual governance statement, which risk management feeds into, and various other changes that I reference in the document. So I don't think, so I think there hasn't been a substantial, you know, lots of substantive changes, but I hope we've amplified one or two issues that make it, make the policy more digestible and hopefully more accessible to those who may be or less familiar with the topic. The plan, obviously, once we've discussed it tonight, would be at some point to go to Cabinet, maybe March, maybe April, depends how big the agendas are, but effectively we're living and breathing this regardless. Happy to take any comments or questions, Chair.
Thank you. I think the policy is very clear and very useful. I just want to ask very quickly, was there a reason, I think it's up to, you've gone up to April 2026, so it's a 4-year. Was there any particular reason for that?
Not really. I think my view was that, I mean, fundamentally, this was done quite a few years ago. And as I say, it's an area where the theory doesn't change substantially.
No.
So it's not, but having said that, with all policies, if something came in tomorrow that we felt that we needed to reflect and update in the policy, then legislation changed and we had to do something, for example, then, you know, clearly we'd review it much earlier. So, no, I mean, I don't, my view is, you know, I'm not too worried about what the interval dates are as long as it feels current.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
I could have went for 2 years, I could have went for 4 years. I'm not sure it matters too much as long as we're alive to the fact that we may need to tweak things.
Thank you. Just asking the question, and certainly I found the session from Zurich on risk management very interesting and useful. I'm sure other members did who attended it. I'll open this up to any questions from members on the risk management policy. Anybody got any comments or? Councillor Beggy. Can you unmute, please?
Sorry, I was just trying to play a game of chicken with Gordon. I know he likes to go last. I was going to see him with a hand up first. Sorry if these questions are out of ignorance, Sab, so feel free to frown at me. Policy statement 2.1, just reading through what's included in there. What's not included in there is anything about financial position. Is that hoovered up in somewhere else? Obviously a huge risk as far as is the financial position of the council, but it's not expressly brought out in that paragraph.
Mr. Darroch, could you want to come back on that?
Yeah, the context, if you like, for risk management was covered in section 1 in terms of that forward from the chief executive. But what we tried to get across there is the key things that are the key things that make the climate we're working in extremely challenging, of which you're quite right, Councillor Beggy, that finance is one of them. And as you'll see, it's I'm very predictable. I put it as number 1 on the list there. Predictable like that.
Do you have another one, Councillor Beggy?
Sorry, yes.
Do carry on. Yeah.
Just a couple. In the Appendix A, sources of risk.
Yeah.
Something that I've personally been involved in professionally is IT security and security risk and data breaches. I couldn't quite see where that fitted into one of those headings, or whether or not that should be included or put somewhere separately.
Yeah, you're certainly right. It's one of the cyber risk is something we're focusing on, and I would say at this point in time, we have managed. It's in the Q3 report, but Andy Nix has managed just to put a bid into central government and secured £150,000 worth of funding from central government. He's played the system very, I should say that, but he's done very well to get us the most funding he can. And we've got £150,000, which is in the Q3 report when you see it, to allow us to actually mitigate the cyber risk. So you're right, it is one. I think it's covered in technology, something around physical assets. The sources of risk are examples, but it's certainly the one you referenced. We are very much.
No, I'm aware that you're all over it, Sav. It's just, again, it was just such a key risk. I didn't know if it needed bringing out.
Can I just follow up on that? I mean, I think just looking at that Appendix A, okay, we can understand it's in there, but do you not think it should be actually in there as a specific item? We just call it safety and security of land equipment. Technology is obsolescence, ability to respond to changing demands. I would have thought cyber security was actually a separate.
Yeah, I'm happy to add stuff in. It's not meant to be exhaustive, but I'm happy to stick something in because it is something which is extremely important, and it certainly will only add to it. So I'll add a comment in around that.
Right.
Is that okay, Councillor Beggy?
Yeah, thank you. I didn't want to create extra work, but I just know it's very important. That's fine. And just again, I don't want to be pedantic. 6.2, evidence of effectiveness of this approach. And we've got various things like, will we reviewed and discussed at appropriate forums, etc. It doesn't specifically say reviewed and discussed and minuted. I don't know if that should be included, to make sure that we have a written minute of these meetings to ensure that it has been done and can be referred back to if a risk occurs.
Sorry, which bullet were you referring to?
I'm looking at 6.2 approach.
What we expect to see. Yeah, I mean, I don't feel that strongly about that, if I'm honest. I mean, obviously the minutes of this meeting are minuted. We don't minute SMT meetings. I'm not sure it would add much to the control framework to do that.
It was just a point for discussion to go south, because if obviously it's discussed and then an issue happens, there is no record that was ever discussed.
Yes, I understand. Yes, I understand the point. I mean, obviously we have an agenda. Yeah. Yeah. Let me have a think about that. Yeah.
Can we leave that with an action point for you to consider?
It's something I'll discuss with Rachel. Just to see, I'd be interested to see what others do about things like that, because yeah, I understand I do recognise the importance of showing that we have discussed and dealt with issues. Obviously, I do recognise the importance of that. Yeah, but that doesn't just apply at strategic risk strategy; it applies at other levels as well. So, but yeah, let me talk to Rachel about what we might do on that. It's probably
okay. Thank you.
Useful. Thank you.
Councillor Beggy, have you got another one?
That's all the questions of the handwriting I can read. If I can decipher the other one, I will come back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, did you want to come in now, even though your hand isn't yet up?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of minor things, really. I think policy overall, I'm very happy with. So I think I've done a good job here to bring it up to date. And I think I'm just picking up a couple of things. Where are we now? Yeah, we've got internal audit undertaking quarterly testing of risk registers, but the committee's seeing the risk register presented twice a year. Are we happy with that? Is that an acceptable position? I'll leave that hanging, win for members to consider. The other one I've got is on 7, page 23, the chief executive. The question I've got is, does he sign it off or does he approve? And there's a subtlety about that, signing something off as against actually the leader and the chief exec signing and approving a document.
Thank you. Sav, do you want to answer that, or did Councillor Payne want to come in response to that first? Whoever wants to take that one.
I'd let Councillor Payne say something first. Yeah.
All right. I just recall that the 6-monthly review of the risk register by the committee was in line with the KIPFA guidelines, as I recall from my training. So that's the KIPFA recommendation.
Okay, it's fine.
Thank you. And the question on the signing off of the
I don't know. I might defer to my internal and external audit colleagues here about the exact. I mean, I've written sign off. Does the leader? I'm not sure. I'm not sure approval is the right word, but I know that obviously GT will audit it, and I know Rachel helps others put them together. I don't know whether it is sign off or approve. Actually, I'm not.
Okay, could one of Paul or Laurelyn from Grant Thornton answer that one?
If they don't know, we'll take you away and look at it.
Yeah.
I think it might be one to take away and think about.
Okay.
Approving it,
confirmation
the issue I have with it is the annual governance statement, when they're signing it off, they're signing that it fairly represents, a bit like what the committee does, because actually, in fact, you guys approve it.
Yeah.
So you guys approve it. So actually, I'm not sure it's necessary for them to approve it, because you guys actually approve it as part of when you do your accounts. So you're the ones who approve it. And in the approval, you're approving that it sort of presents fairly the governance arrangements at Rutland. It's not a fantasy. It's not a made up story. It reflects how we do business. So I think the Audit and Risk Committee actually approve, but we will go back to these sit for guidance and see what the powers that be say. Interesting.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I certainly know the committee approves it. That's
yes, yeah.
Certain. We'll go and have a look at that.
Yeah,
thank you.
I saw Rachel's hand going up just a second there. She flashed in front of us. Do you want to comment on Rachel?
Rachel, would you like to come in on that as well?
Yes, I was just going to agree with Sav actually on that. As of my understanding, and obviously I'm subject to confirmation with the SIP for guidance, but my understanding is that the audit committee approves the annual governance statement for sign off by the chief executive and the chair, for example. So that's my understanding. So pretty much similar to Sav's view as well.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your questions, Councillor Brown?
So we may want to just clarify that then, that the sign off the governance statement along with the council, which has been approved by the Audit and Risk Committee. So that there's clarity about the steps, if that's the process.
Yeah, it's a fair shout, because I'm just looking here at the third bullet of where it says at the top, Audit and Risk Committee, and he says to review the state. Oh, that should say annual governance statement. Anyway, so I'll correct that. To review the annual governance statement prior to approval by the leader. Yeah, I think there's a bit of tidying up to do. I think.
Okay, thank you. We can
tied myself in knots here, possibly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
One other small point of clarification from me. The Appendix B, the risk register example template, I picked up somewhere in the body of the paper, and I can't find where it is now, that there was a change to it. Is this what we've seen before as a template, or have you made any changes in the writing of this?
No, this is, it was different before, and this is the one that we use now, that is that we see at the committee. Okay, right, so it hasn't changed since we looked at one at the committee. No, and this is I think this is just a cut and paste from one of the, well, it is a cut and paste from our existing risk register as an example. Okay, thank you. Has anyone else got any, we're asked to comment on the risk management policy before it's presented for approval to Cabinet. Has anyone else got any other comments to make? Is that a general no? Oh, Councillor McCartney.
Well, I'll simply echo Gordon's words from earlier, that I think the policy is on the whole pretty good. I think it's a good piece of work, and I think if we've got to make a comment, it would be that I'm happy with it. Great, thank you, and thank you for updating that, Sav, and presenting it to us. Okay, item number 9, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act update, which we usually receive a verbal update from Strategic Directive for Resources. Anything to update? No. No, that is your verbal update. We can move on. Okay, thank you. Item number 10 is the internal audit update. Is this for Rachel, are you presenting this, or is yes? Okay, we don't need anything from Sav to start with. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is, as you say, the latest update on the delivery of the internal audit plan for the current financial year. So within the report, members will see that there is a copy of the internal audit plan as table 1, sorry, on page 4 of the report. So that sets out all of the assignments and the current status as at the time of producing this report. So we are continuing to plough through the audit plan, and we're making good progress, and we continue to be on track to deliver at least 90% by the end of March this financial year. So the report does reflect one amendment that we made to the internal audit plan under the delegated powers with approval from the chair of this committee and the Section 151 officer. And this was set out for you in paragraph 2.7 of my report. And it basically reflects an amendment within the adult social care audit coverage, where we had originally planned to do an audit around case management arrangements and the processes that apply there. But given that those are currently subject to review and they're likely to be changed within the next couple of months before the end of this financial year, what we thought would be of more value would be to reallocate that time to one of the key audits. We just talked about risk management. I think one of the council's biggest risks is around safeguarding of adults and children, of course. But I think if we've got those days available to cover risks within the adults social care services. I think that's a very good use of our data at this point, particularly given some of the context at the moment, some of the other cases that have been flagged nationally. I think it's a valuable piece of work to give you as a committee some assurance around that priority key risk within the council's coverage. So we have also finalised 3 further reports since the last committee meeting, so members will have received copies of those as they were finalised. And I haven't got anything to flag to the committee of any significant areas of concern in relation to any of those audits. We only have one action that's currently overdue, and that's a low priority recommendation. So they've got nothing to flag to the committee members at this time of anything that's causing me concern around unimplemented audit recommendations. So that's a quick run through of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Any questions from members of the committee? Councillor Brown.
First of all, I'd like to thank Tom and Rachel for getting all the reports now up onto the Teams folder. That's much appreciated. However, can I ask a question, and I'll come back with a supplementary, and that is, do all members of this committee get copies of all reports as they're published?
So through you, Chair.
Is that for you, Rachel, to answer, or for Tom?
I'm happy to take it, and then Tom can obviously add anything else from his side of the process. As soon as we finalise any audit reports from the audit plan, any planned audit assignments, these are issued to the portfolio holder and the chair of the audit committee as part of the initial circulation. I then forward that onto the governance team, and they, I understand, then circulate that to members of the audit and risk committee and upload it onto the relevant site, which I understand is the process that should now apply. So hopefully Tom can confirm that as well.
Can you confirm that, Tom? Yeah,
that's correct. There have been, as Councillor Brown noticed, 1 or 2, particularly looking towards the beginning of last summer, that were missed off, but we've tidied up those reports now, and we're in a good place with those now, aren't we, Rachel?
Thank you. And can I confirm, so you're sending those as attachments rather than as links to the Teams folder?
We send the attachments themselves when they come from Rachel, and then we upload them at the same time, and include in the email with the attachment also a link to where it can be found in the Teams group.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brown, you have a supplementary on that?
Yeah, I'm quizzing that. I'm going to have a look at my file now and just check that. There was a particular report on contract management, or on contracts. I'm just trying to remember which one it was now. But in fact, it was relating to, yeah, it's that one there. Let me just pull it up. 18th November, I think it was. Yeah, 18th November, about, and it was titled Contract Management 21-22. Now, I do not recall receiving that, and if I did, it's my fault, and I apologise. But the recommendations on the action plan relating specifically to the minerals contract that we went out to tender on had a fairly significant recommendation. And I know that both Councillor Beggy and myself have been in discussions with the portfolio holder on this matter, and the leader on this matter, that the contract has now been placed, and there's some issues around that. That's why I'm wondering whether that was actually published, because I'd have loved to have seen that in November of last year, given our situation. So can we make sure that reports do go out as requested or as identified this evening? Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, did you want to come back on that one specifically, or?
I can see that the contract management audit report is in the members Teams group, which I've got on my other screen, but perhaps me and Rachel can go away and just confirm again that we've got everything. There was also an action that we undertook when we looked at that last month, was we saw that sometimes we were uploading them with various numbers effectively in letters rather than the actual full title of the audit report. So that might be why members haven't realised that's what they've got, but we've gone through and edited the Teams group to clearly say contract management in the title rather than just the code used by audit.
Okay, thank you. I think we seem to have the system sorted now, so going forward we should be, thank you for your work on that, we should be able to make sure that everybody has sight of those documents in line with the process.
Yeah, can I just come back on that and apologise to Tom? It was received under coma back in November. It wasn't received as contract management, hence my missing that one.
I think the naming of it is important as well, so we're very clear what we are getting. Okay, thank you.
Since that happened, I've made that clear to the team as well.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Brown, did you have another question?
No, that's all. Thank you, Chair.
Any other members have a question on any questions on the internal audit update? Can't see any hands. Rachel, were you just able to tell us which was it's really good that there's only the in terms of the outstanding action, the one that hasn't been implemented? Are you able to give us just an idea what that was, which department it related to?
Yes, yeah, I'm happy to do that. It was a very low priority recommendation. It arose from the health and safety audit that we performed earlier in this financial year, and it was just about updating some of the details within the terms of reference of one of the groups, which I understand is on the agenda for the next meeting but hasn't yet been finalised. So we've just left it open until we've seen that being confirmed at the next group meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. So that report is for noting. So on to item number 11, which is the internal audit planning for 2022-23. At the last meeting, obviously members were notified if there were any areas of that they felt was worth adding to the list to consider, and also did contact the chairs of scrutiny committees and had a few other suggestions which I've put forward to Rachel for her to consider, and these are included in the list for us to have a look at this evening. So over again to Rachel to take us through the plan for 22-23 and input from members as to priorities, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as explained, we are now looking at the internal audit planning for 22-23. So as discussed last meeting, I have been working through the audit planning process that we agreed. So that's involved consultation with senior management. It's been involving looking at risk register entries and various other sources of intelligence that we can use to identify areas of risk, areas that might be valuable for internal audit coverage. We've also, of course, thank you to members of the Audit and Risk Committee who have flagged some potential areas that you require assurance on that I've also factored into that consultation process. And you'll see that some of those, the majority of those, in fact, are on the list this evening. The list as it stands is not an audit plan because obviously we now need to go through the next stage of whittling this down and prioritising, but I just wanted to share this initial long list of potential areas with the Audit and Risk Committee to really get your feedback in areas where you feel we need to prioritise, anything that you would like me to take into consideration in risk assessing and prioritising these areas for coverage. Anything that you feel is a must-have, for example, from the list, or anything that you would prioritise as slightly lower, given other assurances perhaps that you have from other sources that you think might reduce the value of an internal audit assignment at this time. All I would add, in addition to that, is it's been really useful going through this process so far, actually, that some of the areas highlighted by members of the committee have been quite consistent with some of my own views, and we actually had some areas that overlap there, which was nice to see, including things like home to school transport, which was at the top of my agenda, which was also mentioned in a consultation with the committee as well. So that's been really useful. Just to mention, there was one area mentioned in some of the feedback by the area of feedback from the committee in relation to potential areas looking at leases of the council's assets. You will note that's not included here, but the reason for that is that that's actually included in the current year's financial audit plan. So we are covering that in Q4 as part of the asset management audit. So I just wanted to mention that. That's why that's not factored in. I haven't missed that one. So hopefully we'll give the assurance you need in relation to that as part of this year's audit plan. So I'm happy to hand over chair to members of the committee. I welcome any feedback on the current list, and I shall then take that away and look forward to bringing the draft audit plan to you at the next meeting of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. One thing I just wanted to check before opening up to other comments from members, children's safeguarding, I thought, is that included in the list for next year? I thought that was the plan to actually, that was due for looking at next year.
Sorry, just finding my mute button. Yes, so just to mention, just to explain that one actually. So we have obviously included adult safeguarding in the current financial year. We looked at including something around children's safeguarding, and when I've discussed this with senior management and actually reflect on some of the other sources of assurance we have around the Ofsted inspection regime, there's perhaps greater value in enabling the professionals, I suppose, to be doing those inspections. They already are subject to a lot of inspections in some of these particular areas. So what I think might be of greater value, and it's something that I do with other councils in a similar position actually, is we look at particular areas of safeguarding. So things like, we've looked at fostering, for example, and the safeguarding controls around that. We've looked at, we've got an item on the potential list here around the corporate parent responsibility, and I think that's a really useful piece of work that we could do with the council to look at how that's exercised as a role, how those with a corporate parent responsibility are exercising and are aware of their responsibilities in that area. And that has a big safeguarding implication as well. So I think whilst we haven't got something that's titled child safeguarding, I think we're looking at key elements of it. We've also got children missing from care on there as well. So again, another potential risk area around that. So I think if we can target specific areas and also follow up on any actions arising from Ofsted reviews, I think that's perhaps where we add the most value in that area. So that's the basis for that approach.
Okay, thank you. So when you've looked at children's safeguarding in the past, have you taken children's safeguarding as an area and audited that? And you're saying or have you done it in this way in the past?
No, we've not done an audit of children's safeguarding, mainly because they are subject to the Ofsted inspection regime, whereas adults doesn't have quite the same. Having said that, they are going to be coming under the CQC audit regime going forward, so that will be a similar mechanism. But at the moment, in the past, when I've worked with Cambridgeshire, for example, and other county councils, we've tended to give that area to Ofsted. We rely on that. They do very in-depth work, of course, and they're very much they're the professionals, I suppose, in assessing the professional judgment in a lot of these cases. So we tend to look more at the action plans arising from those. So if we'd had an inspection, we'd look at the follow-up work on that. And I know we've got an item in there around the development of the service, and that would potentially reflect on the visit that's taken place recently at the council as well. So it's not that we used to do children's safeguarding audit and we're not doing it now. That tends to be the approach we've taken in the past. Okay,
thank you. Can I open up to any members who've got questions or comments? As Rachel said, this isn't the audit plan, but this is a list of areas to be considered for the audit plan. So yeah, open to members, any comments on priorities, key areas. Hopefully we've included having had the chance to sort of put forward suggestions. There's no other areas, but if you think of another area now, then do speak up. Any comments or thoughts? No? Okay. Oh, I'm going to put a timer on this, Councillor Brown, to
yeah, sorry.
Councillor Brown.
I was trying to let everybody else go first, and nobody wants to speak tonight. It's terrible. You asked the question, which priorities would we have? I think clearly I support the home to school transport one. It's one I'm quite keen to see. I think the waste and highways contracts and support of those, again, is very critical given the values of money that we're talking about, and support for that is good. Corporate parenting, again, this only came in, what, 4 or 5 years ago now, and it would be really good to see just how well we're doing with that, and particular council involvement in that, because if I'm not mistaken, we have all have a responsibility in that area, and I'd like to understand if councils understand their responsibilities in that particular aspect. SEND, in particular with the EHCPs, and whether we're sufficiently vigorous in our analysis. I'll leave it at that, but certainly that area of challenge on the EHCPs. And my care services, I think, is another area where we've developed a different way of working, and you know, how robust are the processes in that way of working. So those are the ones that I pick up. Taxi licensing, I just picked that up because not necessarily for audit at this point in time, but as Sav probably recalls, we have some licensing issues to resolve on that, and I'm not too sure whether we've actually pursued that through. I'm probably out of date on that now, but the safeguarding aspects of it, because we were looking at making some fairly fundamental changes with our relationship with taxi operators. So it may be that I just want to ask the questions around that before we spend too much time, because I know that has to be implemented fairly soon. We did implement the legal requirement, but I think we wanted to go further than that on the taxi licensing. And then the question is, what might come from the value for money of the VFM analysis that Grant Thornton are producing, and anything that falls out of that. So I want to leave ourselves flexible. If we can see the VFM report well before our April meeting, then, and Sav can look at it, and Rachel can look at it, then if there's any issues falling out of that would be appropriate to look at, then I think that might be useful as well. So those are my thoughts on the priorities, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I think, Rachel, it might be useful. Obviously, this is a list, and you put it under separate headings. The audit plan won't have time to do everything of everything, and we could all pick things that we think should be priorities. And I'd agree with Councillor Brown. Also, maybe the COVID grants, as you said, arising from the Ofsted, etc. Will you, when you come back with the audit plan, sort of produce a bit of a hierarchy of levels of services, and also to make sure we've got a spread between directorates and things that we haven't looked at for a while? Just how will you approach pulling that audit plan together? And do you need anything else from members at this stage?
No, I think that it's been really useful to get the feedback on those priority areas, which, as I say, I'll take away and feed into that process. Obviously, what I will be going through now is prioritising those areas of coverage, so assigning a level of risk and value that could be added by each of the reviews. Ultimately, we will end up with some that don't quite make the cut, and that will be effectively a reserve list that will accompany the audit plan when it comes to the committee. So if at that point there's any view that actually we've got something wrong and we need to rejiggle some of those priorities around, then we can look at that point. So I always make sure the committee has sight of what hasn't quite made it on there, and the reason for that, and what we tend to do to get the assurance if we're not going to cover that area. I'll also then split it into who our key client leads would be in terms of the directorates as well, so that we don't have everything within the place directorate, for example, and that we've got that even spread. And to be honest, that is one of the things that I need to factor in anyway, because to be able to inform my annual opinion at year end, I need to make sure I have sufficient coverage. So if we were looking at everything in one particular area, that wouldn't be sufficient to inform that opinion anyway. So that's another reason we have to make sure we have that suitable spread. So I will then bring that draft plan to the committee, and obviously I'd have a separate session with the chair in the meantime as well, just to get that feed in before the papers come to the next meeting as well. So hopefully that will be an informative plan once that comes to you again.
Okay, thank you very much. That's really helpful. Any other questions from members? No, so we've got, and thank you for your work on that, Rachel. We've got, so the 3 recommendations that we note the areas for potential coverage in the internal audit plan for 22-23. And I think we've included everything that has been suggested by the members. Secondly, obviously our next meeting when we look at this audit plan will be in April, and we don't want the internal auditors to be sitting around with nothing to do in the meantime. So secondly, to approve delegation to the Strategic Director of Resources in consultation of myself as chair to approve an interim internal audit plan, just to start off with, pending approval by the committee in April. And thirdly, to note that the audit plan is flexible and will be kept under review during the year to ensure it remains focused on key areas, as happened this year with the change because of the circumstances and changes in systems in care assessments. So could somebody move to propose those recommendations? Is anyone happy to do that? Is that Nick? Sorry, I didn't see Nick. Councillor Beggy, thank you. Seconded by Councillor McCartney. Everybody in favour of those recommendations?
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. So that's item 11. Item 12 was any other urgent business. The only thing I wanted to mention under that is that thinking about training for audit committee members, which we have had in the past when we're meeting in person, I think, and I believe would be useful to have going forward. Having talked to Rachel's internal auditor, there is a self-evaluation tool, and my thoughts were that actually if we could send out a very short self-evaluation to members before the next meeting, and then we can look at perhaps having a schedule of training. And again, any comments from anyone would be welcome, whether that's useful to have for half an hour before the meeting. So we can pull out some topics to have over the next year, starting after the annual council in May. Has anyone got any thoughts or feelings on that proposal? Is that a nod? Is that yes from Councillor Beggy? Does it, would people feel that, I mean, we obviously, I'd say we have ad hoc things like the risk management and various other things. Do people feel that to have training before the audit and risk meeting is a good idea, or to arrange it as a separate, or people haven't got a strong view?
It's easier for me, Rosemary, to do it before because I don't have to change my diary, but it's only a preference. I can be flexible. Okay, so we'll send out, sorry, Miranda.
Yeah, I agree. Having it before a meeting just makes it a longer meeting rather than 2 meetings, and that's always good. Okay, not necessarily every meeting, but have some sessions scheduled in. So we'll send out the self-evaluation, and members could give thought to anything particular that you think would be useful to cover, and then we can program that in for the next year going forward. Is there any other urgent business? No? Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. Thank you to officers and Grant Thornton for attending, and I'll close the meeting at 19:52. Thank you, everybody. Good night.